All right, Italy part two. Yeah, and then they had a building in Rome, in Italy, which was like a 2,000-year-old building, and it would look just like the Capitol building in Washington D.C. It was a huge building with big columns. It was like 4 stories high, and that was a 2,000-year-old building, like a huge building. I mean, I wish I had gone into it and done the actual tour of the building because I mean, that is just so advanced for 2,000 years ago. Like a huge building, like going in and offices and everything. It's crazy. But they didn't have electricity. And even walking in the Coliseum, I went into Coliseum and walking up the stairs back and forth, it was like you're in a normal Coliseum. The stairs inside to get to the top part of the bleachers, only the stairs in that Coliseum were a lot steeper. They were like this. And the steps were a lot smaller. And on the edges, they'd have like the water, because I guess they didn't know how to keep the water when it rained. It would actually go inside the building, so that would drain on the sides. So in a rainstorm, that would have been interesting to walk up the stairs and like see like rain, like water, little rivers on either side of the steps. But Colosseum was beautiful, really big, but all the stones were kind of like uneven. And then I went into some other town, the town south of it, where Pamplona, Pompeii. I can't remember it. I can't remember the name of that town, but the one right south of Pompeii. And on some youth hostel that was on the top of a hill. It's a pretty place. And then I did the tour of Pompeii with a couple of other, some American kids, some Italian kid, some like French Canadian kid. And Pompeii was amazing because they had their own Colosseum there also. Not as big as the one in Rome, but they had all the steps that went around, and then we walked along the streets, and it was all tourists. You have to pay to get in, so there was no cars or vendors or bikes or anything in there. And but you could see the grooves of all the carriages that were like this deep and that wide. That all the I guess over the years they would just they'd find the grooves and go through, and then they would be created, and then they go and keep them in line like that. And the wheels were big enough to go over these steps, so it was kind of like if you wanted to cross the road, you'd have to go to the intersection or certain crossways, and then you'd walk across the steps, the rocks, because I guess maybe when it rained, it would also fill up with water and mud and everything. And so, but we went to like their bars, and they'd have these like holes with these big vats of that I guess they would just store all their wine, and they just like dip it in, and here you go. And but everything was still intact. Because what happened is it all got covered with ash in 70 A.D. and they only uncovered it like in World War I. So all of the paint is still totally intact. You could see and I guess it was a sex vacation area for rich people. So you had like paintings of penises all over the place. And I went into the brothel, and they had like paintings of penises and people having sex, and even like I think like sculptures and stuff of naked women and stuff. And they had a bed there we saw, and it was actually a stone bed. It was a stone, and then they had the top part, like the pillow was actually stone. And then we saw the part where there was actually stores, and they'd have like little mini columns in front of the stores and the holes. So I guess they'd have the hole in the wall stores, and you can still see it there. And like in the brothel, the actual roof was still there. It was perfectly preserved. It was amazing. Roof of stone. And then we even saw people. The people who were covered by the ash, I could see I could see even their facial expressions like this. There was like a woman over her baby. There was a kid there and a person like this. And you could see their teeth. And yeah, there were behind glass. There were lots of people. And that was an amazing place, Pompeii. And then I got back in the train, and I went back up to Venice. Venice. And I walked all over Venice, but none of the hotels had any place open. So I had dinner at a hotel, and then I left Venice. And I probably should have stayed in a hotel in the next town over from Venice, and then checked out Venice the next day. But I figured I'd seen Venice. I'd walked all around it. And so then I took the train right into a border town right next to Slovenia. Ooh, I had time for Slovenia. So I took a train through Slovenia and went into Ljubljana, central of Slovenia, and that place was interesting because it seemed like totally like kind of deserted, like not a lot of people. I guess it's this college town. I was in the college area and it was in college season, and I was looking around there for like places to stay in, and um, and then I went downtown and I saw a couple of girls who showed me where a hotel was, and they got me situated, and then they actually invited me to hang out with them the next day, so I walked around town with them the next day, and they kind of gave me the tour. There was like some cool park on the top of a hill, and I looked around and I saw it was like surrounded by mountains on all sides, but it was in a big valley, so it was a pretty place, and they had a river going right through the middle of it. And then the next day I took the train into Rome, no, into Hungary. And then I did Hungary. And I was in Budapest for 11 days because I had to wait there to get my Indian visa, 6-month Indian visa. And I stayed in a hotel, a hostel that was up in like some big apartment building and some like upstairs. And there was lots of kids there, lots of American and Canadian kids, so that was fun. It was like 11 days of partying. I went down to some bar and some basement bar and hung out with some like Canadian soldiers who were on vacation from the wars in Serbia, and they told us all about that. They said it was like all the Serbians' fault. He had a whole mouthful to say. And then we saw some American soldiers also who were raising hell. We went out one night and some American soldier was running on top of all the cars trying to set off the alarms, and then went to the top of like some whole building. And I was working out at a gym a couple days there and went to the disco also. There's some Canadian kid there who was like wanting to get in a fight with everybody. It was kind of funny. So I'd have to like grab him and like pull him off. But we went to the baths also, which was pretty. But they were segregated. Like if you go to indoor baths, the men, girls and the guys have to separate and go in their own area. But I went to the outdoor baths too, and I had brains at a restaurant. That was interesting. But that's an interesting place because they have this. It's a beautiful place on the east-western side, on the other side of the river. It's really hilly. That's where the Indian embassy was, and the river's really wide and beautiful buildings. But it's interesting because everybody's playing chess. It's like the big chess. Everywhere you go, there's outdoor tables with these two people playing chess and all these people around, standing around watching, like 30 people standing around watching the chess. And anyways, then I think that's the first time I used email. I used like an email account there. Got some email cafe first time I went there. And then I got on a train. I went into Romania to where I think it's called Brasov, the town where like the guy who based the story of Count Dracula was. So I went into some lady at the train station was like, come stay at my place. So I went with her and stayed at some like normal apartment that she rented out and she was using as a hostel. So I went in there, all the other kids there. So I went with some girl to do the Brasov Castle tour, which was kind of like just a house. Some crazy guy who was was really cool. And Romania was interesting because this town, they had all these huge skyscraper apartment buildings that were not done, that Ceausescu back in the 80s, their dictator, built to try to get all of the farm people to move into the towns, the cities. And then he was overthrown, so they never finished his project. So there was just these skeletons of buildings, just a skeleton of these huge buildings, and lots of them, like 3 of them are clumped here and here, that have been there for 20 years. And then I took the train but that was a pretty town because there were hills around. And then I took the train into the capital, just for like a day, walked through. And then I took the train. I think I was and then I skipped the building, Bulgaria. I just went straight into Turkey. But I guess that's the next video.